But what we in the Gulf states really need is to have our way of life back. We want our jobs back, our economy back, and we need our tourists back.
Tony got his life back off the south of England, but he's not BP's only jerk. Here's Chairman Carl Hendrik Svanberg, item June 16th.
And we care about the small people. I hear comments sometimes that large oil companies are greedy companies or don't care. But that is not the case in BP. We care about the small people.
Carl, who cares for the small people, comes from Sweden, so he can use the English as a second language excuse. In front of Congress, Tony had none.
I wasn't involved in any of the decision-making.
So are you failing to cooperate with other investigators as well? Because they're going to have a hard time reaching conclusions if you stonewall them, which is what we seem to be getting today.
I'm not stonewalling. I simply was not involved in the decision-making process. There's nothing that I've seen in the evidence so far that suggests that anyone put costs ahead of safety.
Before sailing off into the sunset, Tony met with the president and agreed to pony up a $20 billion escrow account to help heal victims of the spill. Inexplicably, some politicians expressed sympathy for BP, a company that made $17 billion in profit last year alone. Some even accused our president of a crime.
Private companies need to be held accountable, but not necessarily to the executive branch. It seems to me there's a misreading of the Constitution and a misunderstanding of jurisdictional limits from this White House on what the extent of executive power is. They don't seem to understand that. And now it seems that it's all about extortion.
And if you agree that presidential extortion is a wacky charge, how about Texas Congressman Joe Barton's apology? Not to the victims, but to the oil company.
I think it is a tragedy of the first proportion that a private corporation can be subjected to what I would characterize as a shakedown. In this case, a $20 billion shakedown. I do not want to live in a country where any time a citizen or a corporation does something that is legitimately wrong is subject to some sort of political pressure that is, again, in my words, amounts to a shakedown. So I apologize.
So get this. A Texas congressman who once worked for Big Oil telling BP, a company which over the last 3 years has generated $91 billion in cash flow, that he's sorry they got squeezed. A move that not only catapults Barton into the Joyce, Coulibaly, Hayward Hall of Shame, but also gave the embattled White House a rare chance to appear competent.
I find it incredibly insensitive, incredibly out of touch. And the cleanup costs are all BP's cost, separate, apart, and above that $20 billion. What is wrong with that? How is that a shakedown? I mean, I don't know. I find it pretty astounding, the comment.
Joining me live are 3 congressional Republicans with distinctly different points of view about everything from the $20 billion BP escrow account to Congressman Barton's pathetic comment about feeling sorry for the oil company that was being shaken down by the president. This is a company, by the way, that makes more money than Google and Apple combined. My guests are Representatives Michelle Bachmann of Minnesota, Michael Burgess of Texas, and Steve Scalise of Louisiana. Congresswoman Bachmann, you first. You know, we are fans of yours on this program. You are scrappy, you are independent, but clearly by comparing the White House negotiation for a $20 billion escrow account to extortion, you have overstepped the bounds of even rhetoric. Don't you agree?
Well, understand the context of my remarks. It was dealing with the legitimacy of questioning whether or not the administration will make this a politically based fund. We have reason for this because just in the past several weeks, our colleagues on the Democrat side of the aisle wanted to raid a prior oil spill fund and use it to pay out unemployment benefits.
Do you withdraw?
No, I'm not. I'm giving context to what our concern is.
Do you withdraw extortion or do you not withdraw extortion in the context of your criticism of the White House?
Well, I believe in the idea of BP paying all of this off. What I don't believe in is politicizing this fund. It shouldn't be run out of the White House. It shouldn't be run out of the administration. It should be run out of the system we already had set up, Geraldo, which is through the courts. That was the context of my remarks. Follow the Constitution.
The White House as an extortionist and withheld, it seems to me, the strongest criticism against the oil company. I'll come back to you.
No,
Let me get your
I
colleague,
have fully
Steve
criticized
Scalise
them.
of Louisiana. Do you believe that Congressman Barton should be chastised and criticized and perhaps stripped of his ranking membership of that congressional committee because of his remarks apologizing to BP rather than your constituents?
Well, Geraldo, and I disagreed with his comments, but let me tell you something. When we had that hearing on Thursday with Tony Hayward, I had a lot of issues with Tony Hayward and the operations of both BP and the federal government. Just yesterday alone, we were fighting an issue where our governor had these skimmers, and in fact, they were big vacuum barges that were sidelined. They were shut down by the federal government with absolutely no explanation. It took us about 24 hours to finally fight through the red tape, and they sent them back out with no explanation. Every single day, still to this day, we're fighting the bureaucracy of both the federal government and BP, and there is no sense of urgency, and that's what I've been fighting to try to get.
Was Barton's apology to BP, in your personal opinion, Congressman, out of line?
Well, I didn't agree with it. In fact, Congressman Barton apologized. He apologized to me, but I mean, that's something separate. If you want to talk about what we're fighting right now, our biggest problem is the fact that we don't have a sense of urgency
fighting the oil. So Congressman Barton stays ranking member and this whole flap goes away?
Well, you know, unfortunately, the real problems haven't gone away on the ground. What I want to do is get a real chain of command. The president continues to push off his responsibility. They're letting BP call the shots on the ground, and BP's proven they're not capable of handling this. We want our local leaders who have real solutions to be empowered. Unfortunately, it's the federal government shutting them down at every turn, whether it's sand barriers, which took the president over 3 weeks to approve 25% of, and then just the other day where we had these vacuum barges that were shut down by the Coast Guard for absolutely no explained reason.
Here is Congressman Burgess grilling Tony Hayward on Thursday. Do we have that video? Please run. No? Okay, but Congressman Burgess really nailed Tony Hayward. Congressman, as you sit there today, are you worried that Tony Hayward is now sailing, and he says he is not now involved in the drilling, nor has he been personally involved in the drilling of the more than 100 new wells BP has put in under his command?
Tony Hayward, in refusing to answer even the simplest of questions, I think if we'd asked him where he was that day, he would have said it was he had no prior knowledge.
He answered it was Thursday. He did answer that one.
Great. But this is an individual who, if he was answering honestly that he really didn't know any of those things or they were beyond his scope as CEO of his company, then clearly he's not up to the job. So great. If he wants to go sailing, let him sail, because he's not capable of managing the situation, as Mr. Scalise has just so aptly pointed out.
One of the true criticisms, I believe, for President Obama is the lag time between the disaster and his escalating it to an issue of national importance. The disaster on the 20th of April, not until the 14th of May, well, the 2nd of May made his first trip. 14th of May, he called it a ridiculous spectacle to have the oil company executives there. So, Congresswoman Bachmann, you would say that the president's lag time in responding is a true reason for him to be criticized?
Oh, I think there's no question. I think that that's felt on both the left and the right. It's not just conservatives. I think people who are on the more liberal side would feel the same, because he just didn't seem like he was fully engaged early on. Clearly, this wasn't the president's fault. He didn't cause this to happen. But it's all about executive leadership. and how the president is coming in to respond. And I think there's a real question about how he's responded. And again, our main concern is that this fund not be politicized. Clearly BP is liable. Clearly BP has to make everyone whole. Not one taxpayer dime of any American should be put forward.
Great.
But these monies have to go to victims. They can't be politicized.
When was the first time you spoke, Congressman, when was the first time you spoke of this disaster in catastrophic terms? We found one statement from you on the 28th of May, which would be a month and a week after it happened.
Were you
Are you talking to me, Geraldo?
Yes, Congresswoman.
I'm sorry. What was it again?
We had hearings early in May where clearly the scope and the size of this catastrophe was evident. Now, the first perhaps week or 10 days after the accident occurred, the information was so slow in coming out that it was difficult to get our arms around it.
We were all late, including the news media, including this reporter, including all of us. And I think that we all now have to reassess, but maybe it was because BP was lying and withholding information to everybody. Congressmen and women, thank you very much. Coming up, it's an action-packed program.